Joining me now to talk more about Giuliani's investigation now is David Katz, a criminal defense attorney, also former assistant U.S. attorney who knows Mr. Giuliani. Sir, thank you for being with us. We appreciate it.
Well, it's great to be with you, and I feel bad for Mr. Giuliani. I did work with him in the 90s on a case. He's an attorney. I feel bad for him that he was a searched attorney, and I'm worried about the confidences of his clients. But having said all that, having a bar card doesn't shield you from a criminal investigation. And this was approved at a very high level of the Department of Justice in Washington, D.C. This is not some maverick assistant U.S. attorney who just wanted to get him or something like that. And it's not just some, quote, Obama judge who signed off on the warrant. It was actually probably a magistrate judge, and the magistrate judges are picked by the judges of that district as lawyers who are elevated to magistrate judges who are very competent and very apolitical. So I think that that's a dog that won't hunt. But I don't imagine that the son should be faulted for saying anything that came into his mind to try to help his dad, right?
And according to published reports, the probe is centering on Giuliani's interactions with Ukrainian figures ahead of the November election as he sought information that might undermine Joe Biden, lobbying for the ouster of the U.S. ambassador to Ukraine, while also pressing Ukrainian officials to announce an inquiry into Biden. So basically, it's a case accusing perhaps Giuliani of being an unregistered foreign asset in all of this, perhaps. Do you think that the case would get to this level of an early morning raid if the evidence wasn't strong, particularly, as Tom pointed out, this being done by an office that Giuliani himself used to run?
I suspect that the evidence here is compelling. He says he only made one mistake, but, you only need to make one big federal mistake if you did it knowingly and intentionally. Now, he's somebody, as they said in the Chauvin trial, he knew better. He just didn't do better. He can't argue Giuliani that he didn't understand the law. This is a federal law that requires him to register as a foreign agent. He seems very clearly to have been acting as a foreign agent for oligarchs in Ukraine or for the Ukrainian government or part of it. And you can do that under American law, but you have to disclose it so that people can evaluate what you're doing. Is this really patriotic? Is this lobbying? Is this in the best interest of what you think? Or is this because you're paid by somebody? And if you're paid by somebody who's a foreign entity, we're entitled to know that. You must file that federal form, and you can get 5 years in prison for it. On top of that, with these electronic devices that they're now examining, after the taint team goes through them and sees what they can give to the prosecutive team, there may be yet more violations that are on the electronic devices that pop up. And then, of course, Giuliani will have to face what many defendants have to face. They don't want to tell on somebody, but if they don't tell on somebody higher up, there are worse consequences for them. And so it may very well be that Giuliani, at the end of the day, provides information against Trump.
And people are debating whether he actually would do that. He has been certainly one of the most loyal and vocal supporters of the former president. One other point here. Giuliani was apparently, according to published reports, warned in 2019 that he was indeed the target of a Russian influence operation, but still continued his connections with officials in Ukraine, despite that warning from the Fed saying you are potentially being used by one of America's chief adversaries in the world, but yet the behavior continued. How do you read that?
If you were investigating him, and I was a former assistant U.S. attorney, and I investigated people, and they had lots and lots of stories about why they supposedly hadn't done it or what supposedly exculpated him. But if you're looking at it from an accusatorial point of view, it makes all the sense in the world that Giuliani knew very well what he was doing. It was for his political and perhaps very much for his financial benefit. And he went ahead and did it anyway, even though he was warned by Trump's national security team that he was being used by the Russians and that he was being fed disinformation from Russian intelligence. He wanted to do it anyway because it helped his career, it helped his pocketbook, and it helped Trump.
And certainly Russian interference in our elections, well documented in 2016 and 2020. One last question before I let you go. I'm trying to understand, I think a lot of folks trying to understand the evolution of Rudy Giuliani, that we went from a tough U.S. attorney taking down the mob guys there in New York, America's mayor after 9/11. Then he becomes, again, very vocal, loyal supporter of President Trump. And then very big in the election fraud allegations after the election. Now clearly the subject of a criminal investigation whose home and office is being raided. What do you make of the trajectory of Rudy Giuliani's public life?
Well, if he were going to be a Greek tragic hero, his vice was over-ambitiousness, right? Even when he was the U.S. attorney, he played to the cameras. He perp-walked a stock trader through a trading floor in handcuffs. The guy was old. He was sobbing. And then 3 months later, when the cameras weren't rolling, Giuliani dropped the charges against him, and the case went nowhere. But he perp-walked him on TV. And there were some things like that that were a little troubling about Giuliani. Now we see apparently really blinded by ambition and doing things that other lawyers wouldn't do. You know, he's not like Dershowitz. Dershowitz was a lawyer. I'd be screaming to the rafters if they had searched Dershowitz's office under these same circumstances, because that really is something that's very troubling when they go around searching attorneys' offices and stumbling upon not just the attorney stuff, but the client stuff, things that the client has attorney-client privilege in. And so I think that, you know, he's gotten himself in this situation, and he wasn't just the president's lawyer with Trump. He was a businessman on his own trying to get defense contracts from some of these outlaw regimes around the world. And he did some things that those of us who knew him back in the day and those who worked at his office in the U.S. Attorney's Office back in the day, I think find cringeworthy.
And in 10 seconds, do you believe the other side of the story, coming primarily from Rudy himself and from his son, that this is politically motivated as opposed to being a genuine criminal investigation into possibly illegal behavior?
You know, I don't think that, but I think Merrick Garland, you know, he may indict Trump, Giuliani, and Biden's son in the same week. And boy, that would be something for the rule of law. My feeling is, you know, you take them as they come, the rule of law. And if the person's guilty and there's proof beyond a reasonable doubt, they ought to be charged. And that's Biden Jr., that's Trump, that's Giuliani, you name them. And then a jury can sort it out. And if there's not proof beyond a reasonable doubt and 12 people don't concur, then the person will not be found guilty. And that's the system that we have. And I think we need to have an independent attorney general's office. And we need, of course, to have an independent judiciary and jury system, which we have in this great country.
David Katz, thanks so much for your time and a whole bunch of insight tonight. We appreciate it.
Great to be with you.